So there we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sophia, and I'm going to be your host today. You're going to see me a little bit in the chat and then in the Q&A session later on. With me, my colleagues Simon and Giuseppe today. They are excited to talk about how to shape company culture with you. We're looking forward to the session. And yeah, nothing else to add from my side. We're going to record the session. So if you have someone who is missing the live session, don't panic, don't worry. We will share the recording also on our social media later on. And the chat is free for you guys to chat with us throughout the session. So just mark the blue box chatting with everyone so that everyone in the room can see your thinking and your thoughts. And yeah, I'm going to let Giuseppe and Simon present themselves. Then we're going to start off with a poll before the guys then kick off the session for real. So over to you guys.
You want to start, Simon?
Sure. Hi, I'm Simon. I'm based in Berlin, Germany. I'm excited for this webinar. I've been an Agile coach for about 10 years now, and with Agile 42 for more than 8 years. Yeah, and that's all from my side. Giuseppe, please.
Yes, I'm Giuseppe. I'm an Italian living in Stockholm, Sweden, and taking care of the Agile 42 office here. I'm a leadership and agility coach and trainer, and I've been working as a coach and trainer for more than 12 years now. And so happy to share with you some of the subjects I'm most passionate about.
Super. Thanks, guys, for the introduction. As I mentioned, we're going to roll out the poll now. You should all see it on your screens. And we are interested a little bit in who guys are in the room. Who are you? What roles do you have? You can click on multiple answers if you want to. So I'll just give you a few seconds to do that. And then we also get to know you a little bit. And so far, it seems like we have leadership roles in the room. We have some managers and head of department colleagues in the room, facilitators, coaches, scrum masters, a lot. So that's very nice. Still a few of you clicking through. I'll let you do that for a few more seconds. And I think the clicking has stopped. So I'm going to just end the poll and share some results here so that you guys can also see. So there's leadership, coaches and scrum masters mostly in the room, but there's also team members, product owners, managers, and so on here. A few, I think there's only one person with HR roles. So just for us also to know, thanks everyone for sharing. And you can also share in the chat if you have any other roles that you want to share with us. I'm going to hand it over now to the guys to start presenting, and I'll see you later in the Q&A.
Okay, thanks, Simon, for sharing the slides. So again, welcome. So why are we talking about this subject? We work with companies a lot, and sometimes we suffer seeing like sometimes a lot of low engagement, and people are sad and they don't feel very happy to be at work. And actually, I'm going to show you some data, and I can really. So if you can switch to the next slide, Simon. Yeah. So I must say that my heart is really bleeding when I read this data, right? I think that I usually say that my mission is to create more human workplaces, and I really have nightmares when looking at this data. Like so little number of people are engaged in companies, and there's a lot of people that are leaving. You probably heard about the Great Resignation. We're also going to publish a blog post soon. And a lot of people leave just because they lack appreciation because of their managers. And just this employee turnover have cost in the last 5 years more than $200 billion just to US company. So, and sometimes we talk about lack of productivity, and we want to be efficient, and we don't have a clue about these numbers. They're just hidden cost. and tremendous hidden cost from company and a cost for people. So that's why we are talking about this, right? So because, you know, toxic company culture can cause a lot of bad things. But why company culture is so important, right? And I want to show you this diagram, which is called the results pyramid. Let's have a look at it. I mean, all companies have a vision, something they want to reach maybe in the next 5-10 years. And in order to reach the vision, companies set goals, they set KPIs, their metrics. And of course, whether or not the company reach their goals, it depends on the results that every employee in the company achieves every single day, right? And those results are the consequences of all the actions that people do. And you see, this is a pyramid, so which means that not all the actions will bring to results, because maybe some of the actions are ineffective to achieve the result, or they are just caused by internal bureaucracy and so on and so forth. But that's not the end, right? All our actions, depending on what our beliefs are, what we believe is right or wrong. And based on decisions that you see is on this interaction between beliefs and action, we decided, based on what we believe is right or wrong, we decided what to do through our decisions that we do every single day. But that's not the end yet, because, you know, our beliefs are shaped from the experience we live, because our brain is a connecting machine. So all the experiences that we live through, you know, our childhood or all our life, has created patterns to see through which we see and interpret the reality in front of us, right? And also, you know, the more experience we live, these are self-reinforcing patterns, or there's a possibility to create new patterns, as we will see. So now, you know, as long as the situation is stable, as long that the reality and the market is stable, you know, we could accept that a limited number of people, the so-called managers, are managing people actions so that we can make sure that results are the ones that we want, that are you know, aligned with the company goals. And if we think about all the processes and all the structures that we have in place in our companies, have the ultimate goal of manage people actions. Think about roles description, think about company processes, think about the tools that we use in the companies, right? But what happens if things are changing, if not even the vision is stable, right? We are most times used to the fact that the next 5 years vision changes every year. So how can we imagine that a limited number of people can manage the action and take all decisions? So we all know that, you know, if we want to create an agile company, we have to decentralize decision making, delegate decision making. But that's all cool, but there are problems with that, right? Because if we just decentralize decisions, there is a high risk that everyone is doing whatever they want and they take action that are not bringing the result. That's why in this environment, it's very important that there's a shift from manager to leadership, and instead we try to create a coherent culture, right? Because if we have a coherent culture which is made of how we do things around here, what are the experience that we live, what are our rituals, for example, and what are the people beliefs, then if we have a coherent set of beliefs, then there is a high probability that even if we decentralize decision making, that will bring to action that are coherent with the goals that we want to achieve. And I want to stress on this terminology coherent, because actually we cannot talk about right or wrong culture. There is no right or wrong culture. There is just a culture, this coherent or incoherent with the company goals and with the company environment. So if we go to the next slide, probably a lot of you have seen this graph before, right? This is the so-called bell curve of innovation, right? And that describes, how the different cycles in a market life cycle, starting from the innovators, from people that buy the idea, like the people that are sleeping outside the Apple store once a new phone is delivered, and these are the guys that are buying something just because it's new, and then going to the early adopters, and then early majority, and later majority, and laggers. And we could see that, according to Jeffrey Moore, there is a chasm between, early adopters and early majority. So if we are able to use an approach that is valid for innovators, it doesn't mean that the same approach will be valid for selling on the other side of the chasm. So we need to have different approaches. Like one that is called sell to make. So in this approach, we need to sell the vision and then engage very quickly with a number of people that are really willing to collaborate and give you fast feedback on what you're building. While if we are on the other side of the chasm, we have to make sure that the product has the right features. So in the early majority, we need to be able to deliver the right features fast. But when we go on the late majority, we need to shift on the efficiency and more focusing on the efficiency. So we can easily understand how a culture that is necessary on the left side of the chasm, which is more about being innovating, being visionary, and having a fast feedback loops with a number of people, with the market outside, is very different from a culture that is needed to deliver features fast, or a culture that is focusing on efficiency and keeping costs down, because on the late majority, competition is on price. So that's just to give an example about there is no ideal culture. There's no right or wrong culture. There's just a culture that fits or doesn't fit, is coherent or is not coherent with the market situation, the company goals. So what culture should we have? So that's the question. But the bad news is that you can't design your culture, you can't plan your culture. And I'm going to leave now to Simon to explain us why.
Exactly. So now we've explored why culture matters, and that there is not an ideal culture, just culture that fits your purpose, your goals, your situation. And as Giuseppe said, unfortunately, designing this coherent culture is impossible. And why is that? So why can't we just design a culture and implement it? And I'd like to remind everyone of the Cynefin framework at this point. So I'm sure most people, participants here are familiar with the model or the framework. If not, just very briefly, so Cynefin is a sense-making framework developed by Dave Snowden, and it helps us to make sense of situations to then act accordingly to our sense-making. Yeah. So in other words, if we find ourselves in a particular situation, first we need to understand what kind of situation is this, and then decide how to act, how to respond to this situation, to this problem. Yeah. So if we look at the right-hand side of this this visualization here, these are the ordered domains. So in the clear domain, the relationship between cause and effect is clear, it's obvious, yeah? And this is where established best practices can be used, yeah? So we know exactly if we do this, then this happens. In complicated, the relationship between cause and effect is not immediately clear, which is why we need expertise or analysis to determine what to do, yeah? Which approach to choose. But there is still a stable relationship between cause and effect. Now, if we move over to complex, this is where the relationship between cause and effect can only be understood in hindsight, we can only understand what has worked or what hasn't worked after we've tried it. This is why we need to first probe, we need to first experiment, we need to try things. And organizational culture or company culture is complex in its nature. We can't say if we do this, then the effect will be this. We can only try things and monitor the effects, and then in hindsight understand, oh, this initiative, this change in behavior, this different type of leadership behavior, for example, has been what we had expected or has not been what we had expected. Okay, so culture is complex, and that's why we can't design it and implement it. We can only try to influence it, nudge it. And so here is an overview of things that we can use and try, coming from complexity management, some techniques that we can try that might help us influence our company culture. Yeah? And we'll talk about each of these in more depth in a couple of minutes. But I mentioned already that if you probe things, if you try things, if you try using a particular leadership behavior in order to influence the company culture, the environment around yourself, then it's important to monitor how these behaviors, how these changes affect the environment. And this is why it's important to make culture explicit, to make culture visible. And this brings me to the next slide. So this is a visualization, a simplification of the competing values framework. And the competing values framework is a very widely used framework and model that's been developed by Robert Quinn and Kim Cameron in the 1980s. So it's been around for a long time. And it describes different culture types, 4 different culture types that are characterized by the values that are most strongly emphasized within an organization, within a company. Yeah, just very quickly to give you an idea. So what we see in the top left corner is the collaborate culture, also known as the clan culture. And this type of culture emphasizes collaboration, yeah, as the name suggests, teamwork, employee involvement. So organizations with this type of culture, they tend to have a family-like atmosphere where people are working together, where they enjoy working together and try to achieve common goals together. Yeah? If we move over to the top right quadrant, this is the create culture, also known as the adhocracy culture. And this type of culture values innovation, risk-taking, creativity, so creating new things, being the first movers. And these types of cultures are fast-paced, very flexible, they experiment a lot, they really enjoy taking risks and being innovative. If we move down, this is the so-called compete culture or market culture. And here, these types of organizations, they're all about competition, achievement, producing results, performance, being the best, yeah? And doing things really fast. So yeah, beating the competition, achieving measurable goals. And if we move over to the bottom left corner, the control culture, also known as the hierarchy culture, this type of culture values stability, predictability, control. This is the type of organization where things should remain the same as long as possible, because this is also a fear of effectiveness. If things remain stable and the same, then we'll continue to be successful. Yeah, and these types of organizations are characterized by clearly defined roles, responsibilities, stable processes that are very efficient, and they strive for perfection, and not necessarily flexibility, but rather stability. So just to give you an example, an idea of different types of cultures, yeah? And it's important to understand what type of culture your organization has, and maybe what type of culture your organization wants to shift towards. And this is where we now talk about ways to influence or nudge culture. I'm going to hand over back to Giuseppe.
So I'm gonna talk about these 4 possible strategies that we can use to influence our culture, because Simon said it's impossible to design your ideal culture up front and then create some kind of grand plan towards that just because it's a complex problem. So we need to use techniques that are specifically effective on that domain. So the first technique is about distributed connection. So when you are facing or initiating change in a complex endeavor, in a complex environment, of course, it's important to know where you are going. It's very important to know which direction you are heading towards but it's even more important to understand where you are. Right, so the first step is really to understand where you are and to understand, as someone was asking, how do I know what my company culture is? And that's what I'm going to talk about here now, is about understanding what's your current culture. And just making things visible, it's already a big step towards change, as we all learn about, already from the lean thinking about how visual management is important to initiate any single change. So the first thing is about making your culture visible. The Competing Values Framework book from I think it's from the 90s, I suppose, contains a sort of cultural assessment. But there is a problem with that, right? Because the approach was actually that they suggest in the book was mostly useful for a complicated system, understanding where you are through a traditional questionnaire, and then define a gap towards a gap analysis towards your ideal culture. What we believe this is working, and actually what we created was a tool called organizational scan, through which we can get an understanding about the company culture by asking everyone in the company to report stories about how decisions are made in the company, and try to signify those decisions according to certain parameters. So why is that important? Because a company is not a machine, it's more a social system. So we want to have this as a distributed probe inside the company, so that it's not averaged out by traditional poll, or it's not filtered out by reporting, but it's actually distributed in the whole company. And why do we want to collect stories? Well, because we believe that culture is not what is on the wall, like the official company values on the wall, but you can get a sense of the company culture through the stories that people tell each other at the coffee machine, right? So we want to try to kind of intercept those stories. And we want specifically stories about decisions, because as we saw before in the results pyramid, decisions are just at the interface between what is visible, meaning results and action, and what is invisible, people beliefs and experience, or somehow less tangible, not invisible, because some of the experience you can actually see, but beliefs and experience. And so the decision-making processes are a perfect culture, a perfect proxy for company culture. So through kind of having those stories collected, we can actually get a picture, a live picture of the company culture through the competing values framework. And actually what we'll end up with is that no company has a culture that is just in one of these 4 quadrants, but usually company culture is a combination of these 4 elements, but maybe it's sometimes more or less skewed in one of these corners. And then the result is a list of landscape graphs that we can make available to everyone in the company. And that's the second kind of tool complexity tool that we want to use, which is distributed change agency. So by giving everyone the possibility to access the data and see the data, and using what is called this intermediation of data, we can give everyone in the company the possibility to initiate some small change initiative, because we know from complexity theory that change in complex environment happens not with grand plan, with change project, but happens with a lot of small initiatives that happens everywhere in the company. So by looking at these things and having also the possibility to filter out, what is the landscape, what is my culture in my team or my department compared to the rest of the department, each individual can do something, can be like empowered to take action to nudge the culture in the right direction. But also we have the possibility also to look at the single stories to have a more fine-grained view and take better decision about what to do next. So again, it's not about like having a few people governing the process, but giving possibility to people to tell their stories and have change agency into nudge the right culture in their specific context towards what is most useful or most coherent for the company environment and goal. And then let's have a look at the third. And by the way, the data that we're showing, these are actual data from an actual company. Of course, we cannot say the name of the company, but I think Simon will tell more later that just today, a case study has been published with more data from this company. And then how we do the change. We do the change, again, not by defining, once we know where we stand, not by defining where we want to be ideally and create a gap analysis and make a change program, but actually by using the vector theory of change. So assuming that, in this graph, you see this was some stories and what was the leadership approach in that story. So you see that, the red stories are the one that the red dots are connected to stories that people felt bad about it, felt negative about it. And the green dots are stories where people felt good about it, felt positive about it. So you see that it seems that people feel very bad where the leadership approach were really coordinating, and feels very positive where the leadership approach is more facilitated. So that's what seems that people expect. So actually the point is about, okay, how do we move from this coordinating bunch of stories to this more facilitating bunch of stories? So again, not by making a gap analysis, but by identifying what is normally called the next addition possible. So another area that is close enough to where we start from, but in the right direction towards where we want to be, and then ask ourselves, what can we do to have less stories like the one we don't want, and more story like the one we want, and try to move towards that path, not do not cover the whole gap in one shot, but take the less resistant path towards the next addition possible. And how do we do that? We see from the competing values framework theory that all these 4 dimensions are affecting each other, but actually the only one we can work on is leadership behavior, because by having new leadership behavior and asking ourselves, okay, what kind of leadership, what can we change in the leadership approach to have less stories like the one we don't want to have and more stories like the one we have, we can try to affect the way people react when a work is given to them, when a piece of work is given to them, and then step by step create new stories of success that will slowly change what people believe work and doesn't work at work, and then in the end will change the value drivers. So we cannot go and change what people beliefs directly, because we can't change people. We can barely change the person we see in the mirror every morning, but we can nudge what we can the people beliefs by affecting leadership behavior. So and then do it step by step, right? And then, you know, how can we nudge it concretely, right? And basically we discussed before, it's about creating new experiences. And here we have like a model, an old model from Dave Snowden, which is called Abide. Now, you know, Dave Snowden is evolving the whole theoretical body and all the frameworks, but this is still, you know, useful in my eyes, because this gives an idea about, okay, what are these kind of experiences that we can create? And these are 4, you know, area we can leverage on to affect and to create new experience. For example, attractors and barriers, like we can create new barriers, remove barriers, or attract people to what are the right things to do. Basically, the whole point is about how can we make easier the things that we want to see and harder the things that we don't want to see. I can make an example about, you know, in one company, how we could create attractors towards encouraging highly skilled technical people to spend time into teaching others. And we did this by changing the performance management system, by removing all team goals, all individual goals, having all team goals, and having a small part of individual goals that were just related to learning, improving your skill, and improving other people's skill. So attaching somehow their kind of also salary bonus to these kind of things. So this can be an example of, simple example of attractors. So these are 5 leverage that we can create to nudge the things in the right direction. So again, it's about understanding where you are and encouraging everyone to take action and try to lower the energy that is required to do the right things and increase the energy that is required to do the bad things or the things that we don't want to see. It seems simple, but it can be not so hard if we embrace with this approach that we can't change our culture with a traditional change program. Simon.
I think this is a great example of how organizational structure can influence culture, right? So you change the way that performance is being measured, and you change incentives and so on, and this inspires a different kind of behavior, right? So where people make new experiences. Yeah, and this also kind of relates to what we wanted to show now, which is basically bringing everything together. So this is from the case study that Giuseppe mentioned earlier that was published this morning, where we describe how we used the organizational scan to assess the culture in an organization and then drive change, cultural change by creating experiments and trying different approaches. And one of those experiments was to design a career path, specifically in this case for Scrum Masters. So actually this is so most participants right now are Scrum Masters or facilitators. So maybe you can relate to this. And there would have been different possible approaches to designing career paths for Scrum Masters for this particular organization, considering, you know, different types of cultures, right? So I won't go through each one of those examples, but as you saw before, this was data from this actual organization. In a nutshell, controlling behavior, especially leadership behavior, was perceived negatively by, you know, tendentially, and collaborative leadership behavior was perceived positively, you know, by the majority of people who participated in the organizational scan. And this meant that it made sense to use an approach that is collaborative for designing career paths for Scrum Masters, right? And this is what actually happened. Now, you also saw that part of the organization was used to controlling behavior and this control type culture. So this needed to be considered, right? So trying a collaborative approach in that kind of organization can also yield negative results if you don't respect what people are used to, right? So that's something that had to be considered in this particular organization. But this is just to show you that based on your understanding of organizational culture, of company culture, you can do things differently, and you should do things differently. The task is the same, designing a career path, but the approach can vary very much. Yeah? If you want to know more about this particular experiment, this case study, as we said multiple times now, we just published this case study. You can find it on our blog, and there will be also a link provided in the follow-up to this webinar. And yeah, we would like to close our presentation with emphasizing that culture and leadership are two sides of the same coin, right? So as we mentioned a couple of times, so the only person we can change is ourselves. So we can only try to behave in a way that inspires people to think differently, or that helps people create experiences that may or may not change their belief system. Their belief system, what should I focus on at work? What should I not do, and so on. So what is right, what is wrong, what will produce the right kind of results. Yeah, and that kind of leadership behavior can then influence organizational culture. So the first step is to understand your organization's culture or your company culture. And this is where tools like organizational scan, OrgScan, can be very powerful. The next step is then to develop leadership capabilities, or to grow leadership capabilities and evolve together with your organization, with your company, with your environment, and adapt to changing needs and expectations of the people that you lead. And ultimately, this will lead to growing your organization's or your company resilience, which is a way to characterize how well it's equipped to cope with unexpected changes. Yeah, so this is this is our closing statement. I just wanted to show very briefly that you can try the organizational scan, the OrgScan, if you follow this link, or if you use this QR code. You can use the credentials that are on the screen here, and then you can try OrgScan to better understand how it works and how it can help you shape your company culture. Okay, so I'm gonna stop the presentation, and I see that we have many questions, but I'm gonna leave those to Pia.
Thank you guys for the presentation. It was interesting to listen once again to the culture topics. Maybe you could quickly describe, now that you shared the QR code also to the OrgScan, a little bit how the decisions are written inside the tool, because it's not a traditional questionnaire with predefined questions. And of course you can, together with coaches, also predefine some questions, but maybe just not to make people understand that it's a general questionnaire. Explain to them a little bit how it works with the decision.
I can briefly explain one more time. So I mean, obviously it starts with capturing a story about a decision, so if I do it, how I perceived this decision. So I describe it from my perspective, but the story itself is not what matters so much. What matters much more is how we interpret it ourselves. So how I have perceived this story. What was my experience, and how did I perceive how the decision, because Giuseppe mentioned that usually the story should be about a decision that either I have made myself that affected others, or a decision that I was affected by, in some way. And I should signify and interpret and describe how the decision affected me and how it was made. So what was the decision-making process? And with all this data, with all these insights, we can generate very useful patterns and reports that will tell us a lot about the organization, not just from individual perspectives, but from the organization's perspective, right? Because we can capture a lot of data in a very short time that really gives deep insight into organizational culture and specifically how decisions are being made.
Thanks.
Yeah, I can probably just add, because there was a question from Jeanette about like, how do you identify the story to put to this? I mean, actually, you don't identify them, right? It's about asking people to record stories from their daily life. I mean, it can be any kind of decision, from the most strategic decision to the you know, maybe stupid decision that, okay, they decided to change the coffee at the coffee machine, the coffee brand, the coffee machine. I'm so upset about it because this is shit. So, you know, it depends, right? So as Simon said, what is most important is interpretation. And in fact, sometimes, you know, where people, you know, just to get started, like we just, you know, ask, for example, okay, what are the 5 most important decisions you are taking in this company in the last month? And then having, just to get started with the tool, having everyone interpreting those decisions from their perspective. As Simon said, the story is not the most important thing, is how people perceive, because the reality is not what is it in reality. Like, the truth is not the reality. The truth is how people perceive the reality. So that's what we're trying to kind of capture.
And as you can imagine, there are multiple realities, right? So everybody has their own reality and their own perception, and your own reality is what is true, right? So how you perceived something can be very different from how your colleague has perceived it. And that's what makes it so interesting.
Thank you. I'm going to jump to another question here about nudging the behaviors. Can you give some more examples on how to nudge behavior? Here's a person asking that, I understand I should make it easy to do the right things, but can you provide some real life examples on this?
Yeah, I can make another example on, you know, one was this about like the performance management system. Another one about, for example, like, if you think about Scrum, Scrum can be a tremendous engine for change, right? It's, besides being a framework for developing products or for solving, it can be so for example, creating, if you are coming from a siloed company where people are not collaborating, actually make an experiment and creating a cross-functional team where people are inside the same team and have easier time to collaborate. Then can be a way to let people understand, well, you know, we were used to be told what to do, but now that we are working together, it's not so bad, especially because, you know, I was had a hard time to talk to the UX designers, and now I have in my team, so we can speak every day. So this is actually good and very, very effective. So this is a way, you know, how you can make an experiment. And actually you can make multiple experiments, right? Also experiments where you can, or things that you don't know if they work or not, or you can't believe that they work. And maybe even if it's a failing experiment, you will anyway learn something. So it's also about like validating that, you know, things, we believe that things should not work in a certain way. So this is another example, right? So the whole is about starting with an hypothesis about, okay, we believe that if we do this, this will create this kind of stories that we want. And then based on this hypothesis, try to identify a number of experiments in trying to validate or invalidate those hypotheses. Is basically the empirical process, right? And if you think about like probe, sense, respond that Simon explained to you, does it recall you like deliver, inspect, and adapt? So it's all about like, you know, using an agile approach to nudge culture. It's just about this, right? And give up with the idea that you can define your ideal culture by putting some posters on the wall and then having someone designing up front the project and have a Gantt chart to that. This is never going to work, but it's going to work with this like small things happening everywhere.
So nudging or shaping or influencing culture, it's almost an iterative incremental approach, as is agile product development, right? As Giuseppe said. So you want to try something, maybe you behave in a different way, maybe you do less coordinating and more facilitating in order to inspire a different type of culture. And then you want to iteratively, incrementally check if that kind of behavior yields the results that you expected or not. So you want to keep that feedback loop very short in order to understand and act very quickly and rapidly and change your behavior and then try different things. Also multiple things at once, maybe.
Thanks. What about the question in case of using the organizational scan? What have you experienced in terms of people doing the scan frequently? Are there any challenges when working with the OrgScan?
Yeah, of course, the challenges are especially that people should not perceive this as an overhead, right? And if you do it, you will see that it's something that doesn't cost more than 3 minutes to record the story, signify it. Nevertheless, people are so you know, tired of polls and stuff that this is kind of sometimes can create an obstacle. So it's all about creating again an environment where this becomes easy, and we do with different strategies. For example, creating what we call like some ambassadors or that are very well trained and take care of keeping the momentum. For example, we teach some tips and tricks to people. For example, finish every meeting 5 minutes earlier and use those 5 minutes to record all the decisions that have been made during the meeting or at the end of a retrospective. And sometimes we use things like, okay, since the longest things, the things that takes long is actually writing a text, a story, not signify it. Then sometimes we ask some leadership to share the 5 most strategic decisions of the month and asking everyone. So this is a way to keep the momentum, to make it easy for people. Again, try to make the good things easy so we can have a continuous scan, because the continuous scan allows what Simon said, like you can continuously check, am I going in the right direction? Is this experiment creating the change that I expect or not? And how is this the culture of the area of the company where I'm doing the experiment compared to the rest of the company? And the good thing, since someone was asking about how we can scale up, is that there is no limit to that. Like the organization scan, we have applied to departments of 1,000 people or to a smaller department of 100 people. So it scales up and down without any problem. And actually, you will see by trying it out that you can filter out. So actually having like a more granular view of the big picture. It's not an issue at all.
The way to cope with survey fatigue, which is really a challenge and understandable, you know, also is to sell the purpose of OrgScan. And the purpose, I mean, ultimately, maybe the purpose is to improve an organization's resilience and maybe enable it to produce better results for their customers, for example, or better business results. But the way to go is usually to empower the workforce. And so it's important that people understand that what is in it for them, because it's a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach. It's not something that management wants the workforce, the staff to do because they get something out of it. That's also the case, but there is a lot of value in OrgScan, in those insights for the employees as well, right? Because if their experience of working for their company is getting better, then I think the investment of a couple minutes per week over the course of 2 to 3 months is okay.
Thank you. Maybe we can go back a little bit to the make your cultural visible graphic that you guys shared. Can you explain the internal and external axis on this slide?
Absolutely. Let me share again. Sorry, where is the... I think I actually closed the window now. Oh no, here it is. Okay, got it. Yes, I skipped that part. So the competing values framework, as you see here, consists of 2 axes. So one is flexibility versus stability. And I think I described this a little bit. So those 2 culture types at the top, they strive for flexibility. They want to be flexible. They want to flexibly adapt to changing environment and so on. And the 2 culture types at the bottom, they strive for stability. They don't necessarily want things to change. And now if we look at the other axis, the 2 culture types, collaborate and control on the left-hand side, they are internally focused. So they focus primarily on their employees, on their structure, on the way they do things, their processes, and so on. Whereas the 2 culture types, create and compete, on the right-hand side, they are externally focused, which means they focus primarily not on themselves, but on their environment, their competitors, their customers, market trends, and so on.
Thank you. Also, looking at that slide, you described, Simon, the collaborative space as a family-like space. But here is a person also asking you if that's the right metaphor to use for collaborative culture, since teams in organizations are expected to deliver results. Do you want to comment on that?
That's an interesting question. Giuseppe looks like he has an answer.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is what is used in the book as a metaphor. And actually, you know, since all this culture also drawbacks, actually a culture that is only on that quadrant might have a problem to get things done, right? So that's the drawback of that specific kind of culture. So if you're very skewed in that, you know, the kind of leadership is more like a father or a big brother. So they just value of taking care of each other, they just value of doing things together. But those companies might have a problem to get things done. So then you might need a little bit of a cultural elements from another quadrants, right? So again, it's none of this culture is right or wrong. They are just they're called cultural gems. So they are sort of archetypes. So no company has just one of those. It's usually a combination, and the combination is probably what you're going to need, right, in whatever market situation you are.
Exactly. So no organization is only in one of those quadrants, right? So you have aspects of all of these stereotypical cultures. And just to comment on what Giuseppe just said, so the exact opposite of the collaborate culture or clan culture is the compete culture, or the market culture. And that's the type of culture that gets things done very quickly and very reliably, but maybe neglects a little bit the atmosphere inside teams, right? Maybe they don't even value teamwork that much, because what matters is results, not how people feel, right? So yeah, decision-making. So if we look at decision-making specifically and how fast decisions are being made, those culture types have advantages or disadvantages, and some are much slower than others, and some are very quick, but maybe not so sustainable, right?
Thank you. We have also another very important question, I think, when it comes to using, for example, the OrgScan. When running surveys that include open text fields, this person has had bad experience when anonymity was jeopardized, because it was possible for management, for example, to narrow down the stories and the input. how is anonymity ensured so that people feel safe enough to tell the truth and use these kind of tools?
Yeah, so I can quickly comment on that. I mean, first and foremost, we tell people not to mention any specific names in their stories when they capture their experiences. That's point number one, right? So you can't trace back, oh, you know, Simon captured something about Giuseppe, so or someone said something about Giuseppe, you know, co-presenting during the webinar, so it must be Simon. Yeah, that's something people should not do and avoid. Also, every story that is captured and signified by people is disconnected, technically completely disconnected from any user credentials or user data. So it's technically impossible to trace back this story, and its interpretation comes from Simon or Giuseppe or Sophia, right? That's another thing. And also, people either accept that a story can be read by others, or they tick a box that says, I want my story details, so the text that I enter in, that I put into the text field, the text box, cannot be read by anybody. Yeah, that's another thing.
Thank you. I see that we are having a few minutes left, so I just at this point want to say thank you to everyone who has been here today. I want to thank Simon and Giuseppe for the good presentation. It was very interesting, and thank you everyone for putting a lot of questions for us today. As Simon mentioned, the article or the blog post that he's been sharing has been published today. Emily also put it here in the chat for you guys to go and visit it and read it, as well as the credentials to try out the OrgScan. So if you want to have a look at what the tool looks like and so on, you should absolutely try it out. You can also read more here. Emily is posting now a slide, so you can try out more about the OrgScan and figure out your culture. And if you need any help with these things, if you want to have a discussion with one of the guys today or any other of our coaches, just get in touch with us also through email or social media, and we'll set up a call for you to discuss further. And the recording will be published as soon as we have it. There's been a lot of questions about the recording and the blog post, and it's getting updated as soon as possible. And you can also connect with us on LinkedIn just to ask also questions directly to Simon or Giuseppe or even myself if I can help you with anything. We hope to see you next month again for the next webinar. Stay tuned, sign up to our newsletter, and you'll stay posted. Thank you, guys, and see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. I hope we like fulfill the expectation of, especially of those waking up at 5 in the morning. So thanks all for joining and for your questions.
Have a good day.